siblings and neighbors, sources reported that Husmer's life is pretty humiliating on multiple levels. Husmer's ordinary life is debt-free and he's perfectly content to stay put while many of his high school friends go off to the bright lights in big cities. He doesn't care about impressing total strangers every day as he climbs the corporate ladder when he can invest in the lives of those closest to him. He doesn't have 1,000 friends on Facebook, just a close family and circle of friends in town. "I'm just glad I got out of there and didn't end up like Mike," says Husmer's cousin, Amory Martin, 33, an attorney at a large law firm who hasn't seen Husmer, her closest childhood playmate, for nearly 6 years. "The last thing I'd ever want is to have a loving family nearby, feel a sense of pleasure when reflecting on my life, and be the big failure that everyone runs into when they visit home once a year for the holidays." There's a lot of truth in that portrait of poor Mike Husmer. Ironically today, it isn't all that difficult to pull up roots and become anonymous, starting life all over with a new set of relationships. Our mobile, individualistic culture makes it possible for us to reinvent ourselves whenever we want a fresh start and a new set of supporting actors in our personalized life movie. Even the Lego company piled on with a blockbuster 2014 film that parodies the culture of corporate hype, of which it's a part. As one review of the Lego movie explains, it's about a Lego minifigure named Emmett whose empty mind has been filled with a blind devotion to an indifferent commercial empire. Thanks to the evil mastermind known as President Business and later Lord Business, Emmett watches the same stupid TV shows and listens to the same insipid pop songs over and over again. Everything is awesome. At the end of the movie/infomercial, Emmett appeals to Lord Business. "You don't have to be the bad guy. You're the most talented, most interesting, most extraordinary person in the universe." Then Emmett immediately adds, "And so is everybody." The reviewer noted this is part of a growing trend in corporate advertising to mock the hype even as they engage in it. I'm not saying that there is something wrong with moving to the city to pursue an adrenaline-racing calling, and I understand the fact that advertisers have always targeted our longing for self-importance. The real problem is that our values are changing and the new ones are wearing us out, but they're also keeping us from forming genuine, long-term, and meaningful commitments that actually contribute to the lives of others. Over time, the hype of living a new life, taking up a radical calling, and changing the world can creep into every area of our life, and it can make us tired, depressed, and mean. Given the dominance of the next big thing in our society, it's not at all surprising that the Christian subculture is passionate about superlatives. Many of us were raised in a Christian subculture of managed expectations, called to change ourselves or our world with measurable results. There always had to be a cause du jour to justify our engagement. Otherwise, life in the church would simply be too ordinary. Like every other area of life, we've come to believe that growth in Christ, as individuals or as churches, can and should be programmed to generate predictable outcomes that are unrealistic and aren't even justified biblically. We want big results sooner rather than later, and we've forgotten that God showers His extraordinary gifts through ordinary means of grace, loves us through ordinary fellow image bearers, and sends us out into the world to love and serve others in ordinary callings. Take, for example, the experience of Tish Harrison Warren, raised in a wealthy evangelical church sporting "What Would Jesus Do" bracelets. She said, "I began to yearn for something more than a comfortable Christianity focused on saving souls and being generally respectable Republican Texans." Her story is typical of what many believers of her generation experienced, myself included. She says, "I was nearly 22 years old and had just returned to my college town from a part of Africa that had missed the last 3 centuries. As I walked into church in my weathered, worn-in chacos, I bumped into our new associate pastor and introduced myself. He smiled warmly and said, 'Oh, you. I've heard about you. You're the radical who wants to give your life away for Jesus.' That was meant as a compliment, and I took it as one, but it also felt like a lot of pressure because in a new way I was tortuously uncertain about what being